Hi friends, welcome to Raising Lifelong Learners. I'm your host, Colleen Kessler, and this is the podcast where I encourage you to trust yourself and your differently wired kiddos as you help cultivate their curiosity, encourage them to discover the world around them, embrace who they are wired to be, all while helping them discover their passions, interests, and raise them to become the amazing adults they're meant to be. Hey, welcome back. This is episode 236. I'm really excited about today's episode because I just recently introduced you to a friend of mine, Christy Faith, from christyfaith.com, and she's back, just her, talking about her brand new book, Homeschool Rising. Homeschool Rising is a phenomenal book about why you should homeschool. It really does take on issues with public education, issues with the whole educational system, and talks about the benefits of homeschooling and what kinds of things it can do for your kids. So if you're on the fence about homeschooling, or grandma and grandpa are, this is a book you're going to want to have in your arsenal, and it's definitely worth reading. So Christy's here to talk about it and to share some of her educational philosophy. She's got a great background. She'll tell you a little bit about that, and I think you're going to love this episode. So before we get started, I wanted to give a special shout out to CTC Math, our season-long sponsor. We really appreciate them, as always, for all that they do for the show and to make it possible. They do a lot for the homeschooling world, not just math. They're out there supporting lots of different podcasts and websites and different places where you can get help and you can get encouragement. And through their sponsorship, they make it so there's lots and lots of free content out there for you. So they're really great people who want the homeschooling world to succeed. I also want to give a shout out to Night Zookeeper. You're going to hear about them in just a second here, but know that we are really loving our experience with them. My 11-year-old is diving deeply into the games and the writing projects and all of the different things. So he is adoring it, and you should check it out if you're looking for a writing program. But here you go. You're going to hear about it right now, and then we're going to get on with today's episode. Okay, are you looking for something to kind of shake up what you're doing for language arts? Night Zookeeper just might be the answer for you. We have used Night Zookeeper in the past, but we're back in it this year with my youngest, Isaac. He is just about to start jumping in again, and I'm excited to be able to share on social media some of the things that he's doing with it. But Night Zookeeper is a game-changing language arts program that takes the stress out of teaching because it's fun, it's engaging. Your kiddo is gonna love it because it's different than other things. It teaches your child spelling, grammar, punctuation, vocabulary, reading, and writing through a pre-planned language arts curriculum that your kiddo can use independently. I love this because a program like Night Zookeeper frees me up to do one-on-one help with another kiddo while one is doing Night Zookeeper independently. And then, so when Isaac's doing this, he can jump in, he can learn, he can write, he can engage with the word games and the interactive video lessons and the cool, fun, inspiring writing prompts. And then if he gets stuck or he wants to share something with me, he can pause and come get me and I can go help him. But I don't have to sit there and do it all from start to finish. And let me tell you, having some of those kinds of programs in your back pocket when you are a crazy busy mom of gifted, twice exceptional, and otherwise neurodivergent kiddos is a game changer because you can take it on the go. You can bring your tablet with you. Your kiddos can access it from the computer in the family room or the laptop on the go or their Chromebook or whatever. And, okay, so here's something super cool. Your kiddo is going to get written feedback on their writing from real tutors. So if they need support or they need to be working on something or they need to add some more describing words or they're messing up their punctuation, you don't have to be the bad guy. I know I'm the bad guy often in my house when I'm trying to get my kids to understand a certain concept. And here you have real tutors at your disposal helping you by assessing and taking a look at your kiddos' writing and giving them feedback. Thousands and thousands of homeschool parents have found success using Night Zookeeper to transform their children's attitude towards language art and writing in particular, and you're going to love it. It's perfect for ages 6 to 12. If you've got an advanced kiddo, you could start them earlier on it. If you've got a kiddo who needs a little bit more support with their reading, writing, vocabulary, or other language art skills, you can let them jump back into it or stick with it a little bit longer. However you need to use the program, you've got this. Okay, so if you're ready to say goodbye to the stress of teaching language arts, give Night Zookeeper a try. Just head on over to rll.bz/nightzookeeper, rll.bz/nightzookeeper, all lowercase letters, and you can get a 7-day free trial and 50% off an annual subscription. You cannot beat that. If you can't remember that link, rll.bz/nightzookeeper, you can also head over to the show notes for this episode and find the link there. All right, are you ready? Let's get on with today's episode. Hey there, welcome back. I am so excited to be here with a good friend of mine, Christy Faith, and I'm just so excited to be able to introduce her to my community and let you guys all know about a brand new book she has coming out. So this is going to be super fun. Christy, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on.
I am so excited about this conversation. So Christy and I met briefly at a homeschooling convention 2 years ago, right after I hit my head on a water slide and didn't remember anything that was going on. So our first introduction was me basically dazed and not remembering anything about her. But then we got to spend some time last year at a convention, and we've, been on Voxer and messaging and supporting one another, both in our book writing and our homeschooling ever since. So it's really, really a gift to have you here. And I'm so grateful that you agreed to come on with me.
Oh, thank you. Well, I consider you a cherished friend and a special person in my life, in my personal life, but an amazing homeschooling advocate, and just thrilled to be on your podcast today. Don't know how I'm going to help.
Oh,
but let's go.
Yep, it's going to be great. Okay.
I'm not going to say anything new.
Yeah. That's the thing. We don't need to hear new things all the time, right? We don't need anything earth-shattering. We just need reminders that we are the perfect parents for our kids and the perfect teachers for them as well. So let's take a quick second here at the beginning and just, why don't you introduce yourself for listeners in case they're unfamiliar with your world? Let us know who you are, talk about your family a little bit, and what's going on in your life.
Yeah. Well, I've been in education for over 20 years. My husband and I started a boutique learning center and consulting firm in Los Angeles eons ago. And we worked with the kids of the rich and famous. We advised them on their kids' educational decisions. We helped kids get into college. We did tons of test prep. We did tutoring, but we also did a lot of remediation for reading. A lot of our kids had complicated learning profiles. I've read thousands of IEPs. I've been in meetings with psychologists, admissions counselors, principals, because what we realized, which is not going to be new to anyone listening to this, is that the system doesn't really work that well for learners that are outside of the box. So we were a private firm, an educational center that basically we implemented the IEPs on our own. So, and we also ran a homeschool in the mornings out of our center. So people often ask me how long I've been homeschooling, and it's been so long because I was homeschooling other people's kids before my own. But I will say that I wasn't planning to homeschool my kids. You know, I was an entrepreneur, career woman, and all of our clients were in private schools or were pretty affluent. And we just figured, our kids would go through that same motion of going through the private school system. But you know what? Slowly, I just started to deconstruct my belief in the system. And by system, I'm not only talking about public, it's private as well. Most of our kids were in private schools, the best private schools in the Los Angeles area. And I just realized, looking around, these kids were at school all day. They're coming to our center in the evenings, spending hours on end for what? For a grade, for what, right? And it was just, the pressure was so intense on these kids, and, diagnoses just up the wazoo to try to figure out how to get these kids to thrive. And I started to wonder, I remember a couple of times sitting at my desk with a kid across from me and thinking, I wish I could just homeschool this kid. I wish that I could just have this kid. I could get this done in 4 hours. right? They were at school all day, struggling, often in tears, which that's often why they would end up at our center, is because the parents just didn't know what to do anymore. And we were really great at what we did because we loved the kids. We were able to motivate them. We had certain systems in place. We only hired really special people who had a heart and a love for kids with also the knowledge. And so, when I became a mother, I'm a later mother, I just started to think, man, is this what I want for my kids? And ultimately, and this is the question that I pose in my book, is what kind of childhood is this? What kind of child? And do I want that for my kid? What type of childhood? We all know from psychology how much childhood matters. Like that's not up for debate anymore. We all know this. It's our family of origin, our trauma, all of this. And it really defines. And yes, we can redefine and we can get the help that we need and interventions for our own mental health and things like that. But if childhood matters so much, what are we actually doing to our kids by sending them through the system? And then in our case, we had kids who were struggling and then working all hours of the night. We had kids by the time they were in high school, they were at school all day doing varsity sports. They would get to us at 8 p.m. Their mom wouldn't pick them up till sometimes 10, 11 p.m. That was just standard hours for us. So that's kind of how I started to think about and be more open to different pedagogies with educating kids. And then once I did that, once I started reading some of the homeschool intellectuals, then it was like, okay, it's kind of over. Because once you start to see and read what an education could be, or ask yourself, what is an education that aligns with child development? If you just ask that question, I mean, that's a dangerous question. And so that's kind of our history. And a couple years ago, I just kind of was like, I went on TikTok and I was like, who on TikTok is doing homeschooling content? And it was all people who after the pandemic were complaining about homeschooling their kids, which I will say, like, they were really, too much was asked of those people. We all know that's not actually what ideal homeschooling is. And it was really, really hard, but all of the content was negative. And there was only like one or two or three that I saw at the time, homeschool creators who were giving a different story and a different side. And, I wasn't really an Instagram person because that curated content isn't really my style. If you follow me, you know that. And so I went on there and I was just real. I would do funny voiceovers for movies with Reese Witherspoon. And and kind of the rest was history. And so, yeah, that's how it all started on TikTok. And then here I am now on Colleen Kessler's podcast. A wonderful new friend in the process.
The pinnacle, right? I don't know. I don't think so.
I have arrived.
So before we move on, tell me a little bit, we'll tell listeners a little bit about, because you deconstructed this and then ultimately, right, decided to homeschool your own kids. So it wasn't the pandemic that pushed you to that, was your own deconstruction. So how many kids do you have? Like approximately what are their ages? And tell me a little bit before we go deeper into the book concept, because I'm going to talk about the book in a second. Like what kind of style or flow you have to your own homeschooling.
So what appealed to me at the time, so you're right, and I should have, that's probably the question you were asking me, and then I went like, woo, I went Christy with it.
No, so you are totally fine.
I have 4 kids, and I have a boy, 2 twins in the middle, and then my littlest is a girl. And you're right, we decided to homeschool our kids before the pandemic. This was a long time ago. In fact, we moved to Colorado because we were planning on me staying home and homeschooling my kids and being a stay-at-home mom, homeschooling my kids. And so when we kind of deconstructed, decided that we were going to homeschool our own, it started to feel just inconsistent with our values, that we were still running the center that was supporting the system like it was. And I'm very careful because the people who bought it are wonderful people, and we did help a lot of kids. So, and they've done amazing things with the center since we sold it to them. So, but what appealed to me in the beginning, and this is not going to surprise you, Colleen, is classical education. Because you got to remember, I was in this like upper crusty, like atmosphere of high type A achievers. Like these were people that would sit me down get a meeting with me when their kid was in 7th grade and say, all right, how are we going to do Harvard? And then we would make the plan and then we would execute the plan and the kid would end up in Harvard. So that's kind of the background that I was from. So when you start reading about classical homeschooling, it's like, oh my goodness, my kid's going to be a savant. So I will say, like, humbly so, I think I was attracted to that for the wrong reasons, actually, at first. Like, my kid's going to be so smart if I do this style of schooling. But that was really my gateway. And so I started, when I would go to conferences, I would listen to the classical speakers. And I will say that my heart is true. I love classical education. My kids study Latin, but I am very relaxed with my classical education. I also love Charlotte Mason. I love interest led. I love pieces of unschooliness. So, and I think a lot of homeschool moms, when they've been homeschooling a while, I feel like we always end up eclectic.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I think that I think part of it, to encourage your audience here, when you feel yourself kind of branching out onto your own, I actually think that's a sign of confidence, because you don't feel like you need a system or a program to execute this. You can actually start being a student of your own child and look at how they are learning and what they need and your goals for them individually. And so for us and our family, it looks different for each of my kids. I have each kid in a different math program, each kid in a different this. And yeah, there are some classical strains. I like them learning Latin. I think there's values to it, but that doesn't make me a classical homeschooler per se. Yeah. So
I love that. And I think that that's a really good point, because so many parents, homeschooling parents in particular, get hung up on what things are supposed to look like and then start to beat themselves up when something isn't working or they're not following this like predetermined path. And I think that what you said about parents being that being a sign of confidence as parents start to branch out, I think is very true and should be encouraging to those of you who have been homeschooling for a while. I think it gets harder to describe how you homeschool the longer you do it, because exactly
yes.
that, you start to feel
Right.
like you're just picking and choosing, but you're doing lots of different things. I don't know that I could call myself an unschooler, because there are definite things I direct, except that
Yes.
if you walk into our house at any given point, it does not necessarily look like schooling. And so I
Right.
think that, like you said, the more we get confident in it and the longer we do it, the more we pick and choose from different places. But there is something to be said about finding something that speaks to you in the beginning, latching onto that, and using it to help
Yes.
you grow your confidence.
Yes. And that's why I even, I'm thankful for the big box curriculum companies, because I do know a lot of parents probably wouldn't start if
Right.
they didn't have that type of a path, or some of these, nationwide co-ops where they have something to join and they have a path in the beginning. So I'm very thankful for everything that's out there and how we can pick and choose. Yeah.
And we're going to link to it in the show notes, but Christy has a good style finder on her site that'll
Yes.
help you kind of find your own homeschooling style. So we'll make sure that we link to that. And it's a
Yes.
great way to get into her world and then get some
Which is
guidance if you are newer and
beware.
trying to
Beware
figure.
entering my world.
Oh, it's a good world to enter. One of the things that you talked about when you were talking about your center that I think is really important to kind of build on a little bit is also something that you talk about in your book. So we've alluded to Christy's book. And so let me just take a quick second and say that as this is airing, Christy is releasing a brand new book with Wiley Publishing called Homeschool Rising. And I was blessed to be able to read it up front ahead of time so I could provide an endorsement, which I wholeheartedly provided, because this is a book that should be on every homeschooler or aspiring homeschooler shelf. It's a great book that takes you through some of that deconstructing process that Christy has gone through herself to help give you the confidence to be able to homeschool. But there's a part in there that goes right into the conversation that you were having about the kids you were seeing in your center, and I think is a great place to get us started on a conversation for people who are homeschooling right now. The idea that one of the beauties we have in homeschooling is to be able to adjust and go with the flow. And instead of, like those poor kids in your center who were struggling in one area, you likened it to a train, not being able to get off because the school system just keeps going and going and going, and they have to get to the next thing and the next thing. But those kids who are either, like so many of you who are listening, so far ahead that they're being
Mhm.
dragged back by having to stay with the group, or those like others of you who have twice exceptional kids, or like my own who have some learning challenges in there, who can't quite keep up and might need to stop. You talk about your son reaching a point where you had to step back
Yeah.
and put away the math curriculum for a while. Can you talk about just that, the benefit that homeschooling gives us as homeschoolers or as parents to be more flexible without beating our kids down in the process?
Yeah. Well, first, I think that for me, and I think that other people would relate to this. I think that we're anxious in our homeschooling and we're nervous that we're going to fail. We're nervous that we're not going to do this right, that we're going to mess up our kids. And so often when we have, that the young kid who's just bouncing off the walls, it starts to make us nervous. Part of it is we're nervous because we don't actually realize what's going on in the classrooms in our nation in both the public and private schools. Like, I can guarantee you, no matter what you're doing listening, you're probably more efficient than what's happening in nationwide in classrooms. But yeah, I mean, I love that we can slow down, we can speed up, we can adjust. I will only buy curriculum that I can easily adjust. I love having curriculum,
Mm-hmm.
and and maybe it's the vigilante in me. I love also veering from it and doing my own thing. So, but yeah, I mean, when our kids in our country nationwide, when they are not in this certain box where they can learn things it's crazy. When I used to test kids, and you guys know this if you've ever had your kids tested with reading in particular, it's right down to the month. Like year 3, third grade, second month. I used to test kids that way. And now looking back that I'm a homeschooler and a little bit more deconstructed, I hope we get to talk about that a little bit too. It's like, wait a minute. Why, if our kids were allowed to walk at all, before the pediatrician got concerned with when our kids were walking or when our kids were talking, why all of a sudden when they turn 5, it all has to be uniform? It's really ludicrous. And I go into why we have this zeitgeist, why we have this in my book. We think nothing of it. We don't even question it. We are all of a sudden, if our kid's now behind, your kid's probably not behind. Your kid's probably right. And I think that also just going back to what you were saying about the longer you homeschool. So I hope the listeners here who are in like their first 5 years of homeschooling hear this too. I think that we get more relaxed and we get more eclectic because not as much matters. The longer we homeschool, the more we realize it's more about the who than the what. It's more about, because we realize the skills that are really going to make our kids successful in life have very little to do with memorizing the water cycle. Very, very little. And so we start to shift our focus more on what matters, and that is the cultivation of our little human beings that were given to us to nurture and take care of. So it's very exciting that we can customize our kids' education per subject, how their brain is wired in all sorts of ways, and be patient with ourselves because I'm here right now. One of my kids, according to the math curriculum, we are not on track. And I've been doing this forever and I still have to I have to read my own chapter 10.
Right.
Yeah.
I
We get
used to,
nervous. We just do.
we do. And it doesn't matter how long we've been doing it. This is my 16th year of homeschooling. And I still doubt myself, right? Because
Yeah.
that's just the nature of it. And like you said in the very beginning, we were nervous, parents are nervous, but it's because we care so much, which actually is the very reason we won't fail at it, because we care so much.
Yes.
We care more than anybody else does. And so we have the ability to adjust. And to that point where you were saying that there's so many more important things to learn as a learner than the dates and the whats and the whys. It's more about being able to find information and kind of see yourself as a learner and someone who doesn't know everything there is. I had a conversation recently with one of my children, and I will protect their identity by being neutral in this particular conversation. But they came to me and they were frustrated because friends of theirs were doing things in school and being tested on facts and dates and things like that. And this kiddo was worried that they were behind and not able to keep up or weren't getting a good enough education. And I said, well, okay, sure, we have not memorized history dates. You are absolutely right. We just have not done that. How would you find that information if you wanted to know it? And they looked at me and they're like, I'd read a book or watch a video. I'm like, okay, go do it. If you want to know that stuff, go do it. I don't have to give you a test or make you write an essay about the dates in the Civil War
Yeah.
just because other people your age are doing that. And
Yes.
I think that that was a really freeing conversation. So, what I'm saying with that is, parents, as you're hearing this from me and Christy and other people all around who have done this for a number
Mhm.
of years, also talk to your kids about that, because as much as
Mhm.
as they get older, they're going to be exposed to more and more people, and they're going to see what people are doing in a school, especially now that homeschooling is more mainstream and we're able to
Mhm.
participate in so many different things. They're meeting kids from all different educational backgrounds. So we need them to know that there is actually a rhyme to our or reason to our rhyme, right? There's a
Yes.
reason we're doing what we're doing, and it's because we want to teach them that you're not supposed to know everything. There's
Yeah.
always ways to find it out. So I think that that's really powerful, that idea of we're always learning, we're always adjusting, we are
Mhm.
becoming more eclectic as we get more comfortable, but also our kids need to know that they can find anything that they want to
Yeah.
learn out just by asking a question or digging into a
Yeah.
book or a video. Okay,
Well,
talk
and
to me
I
about that deconstruct. Oh, go ahead. You were going to say something else
no,
about
no,
that.
no. Well, I just got excited because as you were talking, and when you involve your kids in the
Yes.
conversations about their education, that's where you can start to get that intrinsic motivation that we
Mhm.
all want. We all want this. We all know, right? That thing, carrots and sticks don't work. We know this. It works temporarily and then it doesn't. And my next workshop is actually going to be on how do you motivate your kids. It was something that we executed very well at our center. And the key to that is to actually take your focus on results altogether, totally gone. You put your focus on what you can control.
Mhm.
But another piece, there's so many reasons why kids struggle and aren't motivated per se, that we would say, my kid's not motivated. But I think that one huge valuable piece to motivating our kids, and you can do this at such a young age, much younger than you guys probably think, is asking them questions about their own education, asking them questions about their preferences, asking them, and yes, you are ultimately in the driver's seat. So say you're not sure which writing curriculum to use and you know both are good. Say you're choosing between two and both are good, bring your kid on the
Mhm.
internet, show them, sit with them, say, look at these are the features of each one. Which one do you think is going to work best with how your brain is wired? Those types of things I think are so valuable. And kids in our schools it's coercive learning. I mean, that's a very strong word, but I will back that up till the day that I die. They are told where to go, what to think. They have really very little freedoms in their curiosities are squashed. So
Mhm.
yeah, there are some non-negotiables in our homeschooling, right? I want my kids to read. I want them to be able to do math. But then there's some stuff where it's very like, what do you want to study in history this week? What is piquing your curiosity? And I think it's freeing because our kids are going to remember and retain what they're interested in. They truly are. But you
Yeah.
were about to ask me more about my deconstruction. Sorry.
Yes, but even within
Yes.
that, those non-negotiables, like you said, there's flexibility, right? Just because
Yeah.
I remember when Trevor was younger, he wanted to do all of his math in a day, all of his science in a day, all of
I
his
love
project work in
Trevor.
a day. And
He's a
so
riot.
there was a big chunk of our homeschooling years where math was Mondays. He did an entire week's worth of math, sometimes more on Monday, because he just wanted to dive deeply. So he still got math done. He still progressed,
Yeah.
but it was on his terms, and that improved that motivation. So I think that that's a really good point. Again, be flexible, be creative, think outside the
Mhm.
box, and know that there's no one right way to do any of this.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. So tell me a little bit more about your deconstruction, because you had said that that was really integral into to you
Yes.
focusing on homeschooling as both an advocate and a parent. And I want to know more about that process.
Yeah. Well, I am shocked when women who I meet who have been homeschooling, and I'm talking like a decade, are still just crippled. And these are the women that I help. They're crippled with still comparing themselves against a system that
Hmm.
they know doesn't work. And so part of my book, and I say like my book, it's interesting because book is it's kind of for everybody. It's the book that you hand the critical mother-in-law when, where you're like, I'm tired of answering your questions. Here, read this. But in that, it's also encouraging to the homeschool mom because it's giving her really solid answers and data to back up. Like, no, actually, the data shows homeschoolers are healthier socially, right? We say it all the time, but here is the data behind that. But also this piece of, it breaks my heart that so many homeschoolers in our country today homeschool with a tremendous amount of self-doubt. And part of it is because back in Prussia, when they made education a profession, teaching a profession, that then put in people's minds that you had to be a professional, trained person in order to educate a child. What is so important to realize, and you know this, Colleen, but I have 2 degrees in history. When I was diving into the history, what you realize is that is new. This concept of a teacher needing to be trained in order to be qualified to teach children. This whole concept is only about 150 years old. And yes, there were instances here and there in certain empires where there was compulsory state education. Yes, we know this. But overall, like if you look at colonial America, for example, education was completely not separated from just raising your kids. It was just part of the whole thing. And so deschooling is like this ongoing process. And because we ourselves were raised in this system, and I find it so fascinating. I love talking to second-gen homeschoolers. Do you too?
I do, yeah. Some of my favorite people are.
Yes, because they're so calm, right?
Oh my gosh.
Part of it is because they were not raised this way. So they're like, it turned out fine for us. So I'm just going to, and they are the most relaxed homeschoolers I know. And I just love that because that's inspirational to me, at least, of they spent their entire growing up years being deconstructed from the system. And then now they're choosing that for their own families. But it's really hard when you were raised in that system and told that grades are everything and your future will be in jeopardy if you don't get the A, which is just so not true at all. So
yeah, that perfectionism piece. And it's hard, especially like you and I come from an educational background. And I've talked about this before, but the idea that, when people find out I'm homeschooling, or used to, because now it's just pretty much, they know that right away. They'll say, especially when they doubt or they kind of wish that they had the courage to do it, but just don't quite know how to pull the trigger, will say, oh, well, you're a teacher. Of course you can homeschool. And the truth actually is, I think that hurts me more than it helps me, because that training isn't about teaching the kid that is in front of you. It's about managing a group of children to get them to the benchmarks that they need to get to, and then discipline and that kind of stuff. In fact, I've said before, but there are parents that I wish I could go back to and apologize to, because I knew that the system was not the best for. Like, I know now that the system wasn't the best for their particular kid, especially in the area that I worked with, both gifted and twice exceptional. I was adamant I could help these kids out. And there are some that I wish that I would have said, take them out, just go. Because if you just go at her pace, she will outstrip everybody around her. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I think that that's important too. It doesn't matter how well trained you are. Like you parents, if you're listening and you're thinking about homeschooling and, you've stumbled upon this podcast because someone mentioned it to you or whatever, you can do it. You don't have to have, you have all the training you need because you love your kid and you don't want them to fail, and you want them to have the best setup for future success, whatever that is to them. And the goal is not to raise somebody who knows everything. The goal is to raise somebody who is confident, resilient, and self-aware, and can find the answers to the things that they need
because
to
it's
find.
impossible. It's impossible. Just like when people use the gap language, I'm just worried about gaps. Well, there are some subjects where you kind of do want to avoid them because it might hurt you later. It's not that you can't fix it later, but like math, let's try. But with like things like history, people are very surprised, being a trained historian myself, how relaxed I am. I do not go in chronological order. I meant, things like that, because it's more about changing ourselves,
Right.
learning the lessons of history rather than the facts and the dates. And man, and we need to, because we need to learn from past mistakes.
Hey there. Okay, so you've heard me talk about CTC Math a lot on this podcast and in my newsletter because CTC is the math program we use and we love. I am a subscriber. I paid for my own subscription. I've been a customer for years. My children use it. I love CTC because it's adaptable. It is taught to mastery. It shows you their mastery level. You can move on when kids learn something. You can go backwards if they need extra help with something. You can do a couple grade levels in a year if you need to. You can skip grade levels. Every subscription includes access to K through calculus. So you can use whatever part you need. You don't have to be locked in to one grade level. I love, love, love that. I also love the people behind the company. They stand behind their product. If at any point you feel CTC is not working out for you, reach out to them and they will help you. They will get you squared away. They will help figure it out so you can be successful. And if you still don't think it's going to work for you, they'll give you your money back. You really can't lose using this program. It's the best there is. It really, truly is. It's the most adaptable, the most cost-effective, and the greatest people. So check them out, ctcmath.com, and let them know I sent you because I want them to know how much we appreciate them. People have written in, like my friend Carol, to tell me that they are grateful that they heard about CTC Math because they had a kiddo who just wasn't moving forward. And by being able to kind of game the system and skip the areas that they already knew and move ahead towards other grade levels and complete a couple in a year, made their kid motivated. And so Carol reached out to tell me that she was grateful that she'd heard about CTC. If you have a story like Carol, I'd love for you to share it with me. Just hit reply in any of my newsletters or go over to the show notes for this episode where you can find a link to CTC Math and you can find a link to my contact page so you can reach out and let me know what you think about them because I would love to hear who else is finding success with CTC. If you're having any trouble with the program, reach out to CTC because they're great and they will help you in any way you need. All right, check them out, ctcmath.com, and let's get back with today's episode.
But I want to go back to something that you said because just last week I was coaching a mama who looks like she's going to have a new diagnosis for a child who has autism, her own child. She was in tears because the autism center, when she said that she was a homeschooler, she got attacked, very much attacked. And she's having a very hard time finding homeschool supportive resources in her particular area. And when I was talking to her, I was just saying, look, who's going to care about your child more than you? Who knows your child more than you? Do you think a classroom teacher who's managing multiple kids, probably in a room with other kids who have complicated learning profiles themselves, do you really think they're going to do a better job than you can? Really? And it's one of my soapboxes. It just really makes me angry that healthcare professionals, child psychologists, and people like this who are in positions of authority in our culture are not realizing they are so indoctrinated. And I know this sounds bold, but they really truly are. Like, do you really think a stranger managing a classroom of 30 with my own kid who is a very complicated learner, do you really think they're going to be able to do a better job than me? Really? Like, no one, and I was telling her, no one's going to fight like you are. No one is. And so I think it's so important that we take the reins back, that we have confidence. It doesn't matter your own educational background. You don't need to have all these letters behind your name in order to be an expert on your own child. And so step into those shoes with confidence. And homeschooling's so much easier now than it used to be. We have all these resources at our fingertips that it's just, even more than 10 years ago, I can say it even more confidently. So I think it's an exciting time to be in the homeschooling space. And I hope that parents whose kids have special needs start pulling their kids out in droves. Mm-hmm. Why? Because I am a child advocate. I want what is best for children. My sister still has profound learning disabilities diagnosed back in the 80s when they were not diagnosing girls.
Right.
Like in 1982, girls would not get a diagnosis back then. Really, they wouldn't. And so watching my parents navigate the system with her fighting to get her to learn to read and all these things with teachers that are saying, dyslexia is a myth. You're just lazy. This is what they would tell my parents. And my sister is anything but. And my mom says to this day, I wish I didn't even know homeschooling existed. We were in Southern California. My mom was a nurse. No one did this. No one did. And my mom looks back and, of course she has a healthy perspective on how she raised us. She did the absolute best that she could. I have amazing parents. But at the same time, she's like, she should not have been in school. My
Right.
sister should not have been in school. It was really a trauma. I will say it was a traumatizing place for her to be, particularly in that era as a girl, because in those special ed rooms, she was often the only girl in there and very isolating. So, but anyway, and she's one of the reasons why we even started our learning center in the first place, because I have a heart to help kids. And I think they need to be rescued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's, like you said, this is about child advocacy. This is about what's
Yeah.
best for the kid in front of you. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's homeschooling in a nutshell. I say all the time, and you said it today in this interview, becoming a student of your child is so powerful because you get to see who's in front of you and you get to move them forward a little bit every day.
Mm-hmm.
And some days
Yeah.
and seasons and years, that's going to be like by leaps and bounds. And others, it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
by inches. But
Yes.
they're not falling behind peers and seeing that around them. And it's normalized, right? I have one
Mm-hmm.
that struggled to learn to read, and that was never a point of, ostracization. I can't say the word. That was never a point where they felt badly about themselves. That child just would say, I can't really read that. Can you read it to me? Because it was just normalized.
Yeah.
That hasn't clicked yet. Let's keep
Yeah.
working on it.
Yeah.
And I think that is just a testament to what homeschooling allows us to do. And you talk a little bit about
Mm-hmm.
that. I don't know. I think it's like chapter 7, 6, something like that, when you're talking about the stereotypes we have, like about socialization and about where kids need to
Mm-hmm.
be and moving them forward. And when people are afraid that their kids are going to be odd or weird or different. And then
Yes.
what? In the next breath, they're like, I don't want you to follow the crowd. I want you to stay
Yeah.
true to yourself. Like,
Yes.
what are we saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a viral TikTok once that was something along the lines of on the screen was, we tell our kids that, to be themselves, to do you, to all this stuff. And then we send them into a system 7 hours a day where they're told exactly who to be, what to do, how to
Yes.
behave, and how to follow directions all day long. And so, but it's very ironic that juxtaposition in our society. And I'm excited about if you are a person who is frustrated that you feel like you're banging your head against the wall answering people about socialization, please buy my book and read chapter 7, because I kind of explain why culture does this to us, right? I opened that chapter with
Yeah.
a person who commented to us, "Oh my goodness, your kids are so friendly and wonderful. Where do they go to school?" And I say they homeschool, and then they gasped and went, "What about socialization?" And we hear, right?
Yes,
So,
I've heard that same conversation. The
yes,
irony is totally lost on the people that ask that.
yes, yeah, it truly is. And so I really dissect that, why this is the case. But the thing this is my opinion, the thing that I firmly believe is that we should not be surprised if our kids present differently as homeschoolers,
Mhm.
because their educational experience and their social experience is nothing like conventionally schooled kids. So why do we want them to look and act like conventionally schooled kids? Why does society want them to? It's almost like if someone moved to the United States from a completely different culture, and then we criticize them for not acting American enough. It's very similar to that. We are from a completely different culture. We do not age segregate. All co-ops are usually mixed ages. When you're invited to a homeschool birthday party, the whole family shows up, infants and all. It's not age segregated. Oh, the age segregation is like, man, I would love to just have an entire episode on age segregation, because I think it is.
You'll have to come back. We can come back. You can come into the Learners Lab and teach about motivation. You can come back on here. We'll talk about age segregation.
Yeah.
We'll just have a whole Christy Faith series.
Okay. But anyway, and what I do at the end of that chapter, when I'm discussing socialization, I actually researched, okay, well, according to research, what does a healthy socialized child look like? And I came up with 13 most common things, right? I just kind of looked at the research, made my own list. And guess what? You don't need a classroom for any of them. And I just find it so interesting. And I go into the fact that I think what society is off about when they see a homeschooler that maybe is, not dressed in all the stylish clothes, is comfortable in his or her own shoes, certainly uses different vocabulary for sure, because homeschoolers in general, as a population, we are voracious readers, and our kids are reading books. Well, we're also reading out loud above their grade level too. Read aloud is such a huge thing in our culture. So our kids are using different vocabulary than the other kids their age across our nation. So our kids present differently. But I think what hits people and makes them feel so uncomfortable with it is that in school, if you acted like a lot of homeschoolers act, you would probably be bullied. You probably wouldn't fit in. And so I go into a little bit on, are you really worried about socialization, or is your heart like, oh my goodness, because you're worried about your kid not fitting in or looking like the rest? And I think it's really important to look at Brene Brown's research with this, the difference between fitting in and belonging, because one could argue that the person who is obsessed with fitting in is actually extremely unhealthy and not socialized, because they are not comfortable in their own skin. And our system, I grew up in the public school system, and we didn't have a ton of money growing up. And I remember feeling an incredible amount of shame if I couldn't get the pair of shoes that were just right at the right time, and I would be teased. We don't really have much of that in the homeschool space. Honestly, we just don't. And so our kids can present differently. And that's why I say flipping the script on socialization, our biggest criticism is actually our most amazing asset, because we're launching kids into the world that after the age of 18, the world really appreciates and think are so cool and so amazing, right? Because they also don't view adults as scary authority figures in general. Homeschoolers research shows they view adults as interesting people that are on their team that they can have great conversations with and gain knowledge from, rather than, I remember growing up in the school system, just when I saw a teacher walk down the hallway, I would turn, right, go the other way. So I just think it's fascinating. And I think it's important that rather than fighting, like, no, my kid is socialized, and then you rattle off all these things like they're in sports, they're in karate, and we just went to a birthday party, and defending yourself. I'm hoping that this book changes that conversation. I really do. It was really one of my goals for it. I spent so much time on chapter 7. I hope it changes the conversation about socialization, where we're like, yeah, that's kind of the point. That's why one of the reasons why I want to homeschool is I'm prioritizing my kids' mental and emotional health. And ultimately it does come down to that. So yeah.
There's so much goodness in it. So you guys have to get the book. You just have to. We'll link to where you can pre-order it, because I believe when this airs, it's going to be right in the pre-order window that we really want to get that pre-order in. And then obviously the link will still go to it, so you can get it as soon as it's out. But this is a book you want on your shelf for so many reasons. But like Christy said, so you have the answers people ask all the time the
Mhm.
same questions again and again. So you feel confident. If you're thinking about homeschooling or you know somebody is, it's the book to hand them. It's the book to give any of the naysayers. It's a great
Yeah.
book that all homeschoolers should have on the
Oh,
shelf. I was joking
thank
with
you.
Christy and saying we need to like hit the road together because
Yes.
hers is the one that sets you up to be confident. And I've got some next steps in the one that I've got coming
Yes.
out. So we'll just like team up and
I can't wait. I
promote
can't
each
wait to read
other's
your
work just continuously.
Yeah. And also my
It's
heart
going to be fun. You're
too.
going to get it soon, I think.
Oh, good. I can't wait. And my heart too is in writing this book was how much, like I mentioned earlier, it grieves me that so many parents homeschool lacking self-confidence and just riddled with self-doubt.
Mhm.
And so that was really, yes, it's something that you can hand to the naysayers in your life, but ultimately my goal was to speak to your heart, to show you the data behind why you are the best person to be doing this. And I deschool you a little bit too, because that's necessary. Because if we're constantly comparing ourselves to the system, we're always going to feel like we're not measuring up. And so we need to just completely detach and do our own thing. And so that was kind of my heart also in writing it.
Okay, so as we wrap up here, a couple things. I want everybody listening to go over to Christy's site. We're linking to it in the show notes, and I'll let her tell you where you can find her in just a second. But go over there, take that quiz. She's got a couple other freebies on there to download. Just get in her world. Once you download that or take the quiz, you'll be on her email list, and you'll find out all the information about the book, about the different things that she offers and how she helps homeschool moms. She is someone you want in your corner. You definitely want to check that out. And yeah, get the book. So where can everybody find you, Christy?
Well, I am on all of the socials, and I'm Christy Faith everywhere. I'm Christy Faith on TikTok. I'm Christy Faith Homeschool on Instagram. You can follow me there. You can go to christyfaith.com. And I want you guys to, first of all, take that 5-minute homeschool style finder. And Colleen, you might find this interesting. I don't like to pigeonhole people, so I give them their top 3. And I'm like,
Okay.
you choose. I really do, because we're so fluid sometimes. And so if you're curious, and often what I will say is a lot of those quizzes online, they are funded and put on by curriculum companies. So you're going to end up whatever style that curriculum company sells. And I was very frustrated by that. Mine is a true blue, like this is really what you are. So because I'm all about making you the homeschooler that is most true to your heart. So it was a challenge to make that quiz effective where everyone could take it in under 5 minutes. And actually the back end of that quiz is pretty intense, but it is accurate. The feedback that I get, as long as it's been out, is that it's very accurate. So grab that. And I have lots of other freebies on my website too. But thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. This was a great conversation. And like I said, we just need to have you back to talk about other things and then have you inside my community, because that'll be just so fun.
I would love it. In a heartbeat. You just say the word.
Totally. I will be in touch. All right. So for those of you listening, thank you so much for being here. We'll be back next week. Same time, same place, another episode. You can find links to all of the different things that Christy and I talked about in the show notes at raisinglifelonglearners.com/podcast. Special shout out to our sponsor for this episode, CTC Math. Thank you so much for supporting us. We really appreciate you guys. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon. In the meantime, go love on your kids. Go on a bunch of adventures. Enjoy them. Have a great week. I will talk to you soon. Bye for now.